I think that it at least gives her more space to exist and on the stage, which I wanted because her legacy was taken from her. A lot of people in Mexico, even people involved in, especially young people involved in human rights causes, don't know who Digna was. And that's not because Digna wasn't extremely well known in her time, it's because of the smear campaign undertaken by the Mexican government after her death. And they robbed her of her legacy. And I wanted her to have the stage to herself in order to be able to have all that time to speak herself.
Good evening. I'm Susan Spurlock, Executive Director of Ford Hall Forum at Suffolk University. I am pleased to welcome you to the second program in our three-part storytelling series, Beyond Borders, Women's Stories and the Art of Bearing Witness. In this October series, 4 fascinating women storytellers will captivate you as they share their work, which bears witness to struggles about human rights, memory, belonging, and love. This evening, we welcome Alba Jaramillo and Pat Davis in a performance and discussion of the one-woman play, Digna, about the life of Digna Ochoa, a prominent Mexican human rights lawyer. It is now my pleasure to introduce the evening's moderator, Dr. Yanni Moreno, Associate Professor, World Languages and Cultural Studies Department at Suffolk University. Her interests include contemporary Latin American theater, Brazilian language, literature and culture, US-Mexican border studies, Spanish and Portuguese language and literature, and contemporary Latin American cinema and music. It is my true pleasure to introduce my colleague, Yanni Moreno.
Thank you very much, Susan, for the great introduction. And now I would like to give you some background information about Digna, the play. Digna was written by Pat Davis in 2017. She was a prominent Mexican human rights lawyer who suffered torturous attacks due to her defense of environmentalist peasants in Mexico. By the age of 37, she was a MacArthur Fellow and had won Amnesty International's Enduring Spirit Award. She was born in Misantla, Veracruz in the year of 1964, and she died on October 19th, 2001 in her office in Mexico City. Digna was killed because of her human rights work while Mexican officials were implicated. Digna is a one-woman show that has been performed in Mexico and in the United States since the year 2017. And now I leave with you Alba Jaramillo performing Digna.
Good evening. My name is Digna Ochoa. I'm not here to give testimony. Testimony is for a court of law when there's some hope of justice. But I will tell you this. One day in late October 2001, men broke into my office in Mexico City. I'd had a long career in human rights law. Well, I was 30, but it felt long. I had set up a private practice. It was just my second day in that new office. I was there alone. Maybe the men were hoping that the church bells ringing noon would disguise the noise of their feet as they mounted the stairs. I heard the footsteps. 2 men. 3. Heavy steps on the stairs coming up from the courtyard. What happened next? You can guess, I bet. You know from your movies. High noon at the law office of Digna Ochoa. Only there were no horses. Guns? Yes. I reached in my purse for mine. It was a new gun. A tiny little gun, as your Nancy Reagan would say. I wasn't sure it would work. I held it like this behind my leg. I was glad I had locked the door. It was a good door, solid wood, sturdy. They had a key. They threw me against the couch. One of the men fired point blank into my thigh. I'm not going to give testimony. The details have filled 40,000 pages of police reports. The details have obscured the larger fact. Not how I died, but why. This is what I'm going to talk to you about. Resistance. There are people who say I should have known what was coming. I had gotten death threats. I should have left the country. I had already done that. I had already gone into exile once. This time when the threats came, I stayed. Worse than that. The trip I took in the last month of my life was to a place of greater danger, Mexico's most violent state. I went to Guerrero. It's where the students were from. You know, the 43 who were disappeared. Why were they disappeared? For the same reason I was killed. We'll get to that. Resistance. You don't hear about this enough. Not in the way it deserves. You can post about it, yes, but actually challenging power, that's called by so many other names. Stupidity, recklessness, criminality, suicide. All those names have been applied to my choices. Names have a lot of power. You know this, right? When I was living in exile in Washington, D.C., the trucks that came to my apartment building were like a joke. Fur heating. And the plumber? Flood plumbing. The man's name was Mr. Flood. I once had the experience of touring a cave. A guide pointed to a stalagmite formation and said, "That one we call a camel." No humps, no legs, nothing that I could see evoked a camel. But I couldn't look at that formation again the same way. It had become a camel, or no way, that's a camel. Camel in it, we're forever linked. Naming me Digna, worthy. That's what my name means. My mother threw down the gauntlet. Worthy or not worthy? I couldn't introduce myself without raising the question and giving an answer. What a name. I would sometimes sweep into the office. Aquí está Digna, Dignata, Dignísima, which would be something like, worthy has arrived, worthy to the max, worthy as all get out. I don't suppose you use those expressions anymore. I'm a bit out of date. Vencida, we say in Spanish, like old rice on the shelf. Not me. The phrase is, I'm just what you'd call dead. Worthy of what? I asked my mother once. She was peeling an onion at the sink. I was maybe 7. She put her wet hand on my shoulder. Worthy, in the eyes of God, as worthy as anyone who has ever lived. Worthy of what? Of life, of love. As I grew older, I understood her insistence. We were Indigenous. My grandmother spoke the language that had belonged to the people of Veracruz for thousands of years. It wasn't so highly regarded. A German friend of mine visiting a doctor was complimented on his command of Spanish. "That's rare here," said the doctor, being bilingual. Many of the Indigenous are bilingual, my friend pointed out. They speak Spanish and they speak their native languages. They speak Spanish, said the doctor, and they speak shit. Naming, renaming. Step 1. I don't want to overwhelm you with detail. I don't want to be like an old person bending your ear with trivia from the past. I'll omit a good bit. Testimony isn't appropriate here. There won't be justice in my case. That ship has sailed. That ship has sunk. But I am going to use my life as an example so you can see what resistance looks like. I was Smokey the Bear. Bear with me for a moment of English. Imagine a scenario in which Smokey Bear is killed in a forest fire. Just picture it. Would you say, what was he doing in the forest? He knew there were fires there. He must have had a death wish. No, you wouldn't say that. Smokey Bear's whole reason for being is to put out fires. He's going to go where they are. When I was 16, my dad was taken away. He was arrested in the sugar mill. He was involved with the union there. Through the union, the workers were linking up with left-wing organizations that before long would form a new political party. I still remember how that morning was. A light breeze lifting the curtains, the smell of coffee and warm tortillas lingering in the kitchen. One of the mill workers comes to the door. He says, "The police came and grabbed your father. They blindfolded him and drove him away." My mother and my older brother Jesus go to the police station. The police deny knowing anything. None of us can eat. We don't sleep. I walk along the roadsides looking into ditches. We check the hospital, the morgue. We call every reporter we can think of, every organization. After 48 hours of causing uproar about his disappearance, we get word he's in the city jail. We actually cried and hugged each other to find out he was in jail. We visit him. His arms are black and blue. His left ankle appears to be broken. The policemen have beaten him with a hammer. They used the other side of the hammer on his face. When he speaks, blood spills from the gash. I hold his hand through the bars. I would lie awake at night, fantasizing about ways to get him out. I picture myself in a Mighty Mouse costume. That was just weird, with the big blank eyes and the pasted on smile carrying a sword. I would sweep in and open the door. I force myself to picture something less absurd. Me in a suit, with a briefcase, presenting all of the evidence and the door swinging open. That image blocked others. A hammer coming down on my dad's ankle, this time the right one. I would wake up imagining I heard a bone crack. I could sleep only if I reconceived that sound. Imagine instead the click of a latch. I had planned to teach. I wanted to teach preschool, but I had to be someone who could stand between a man like my father and a hammer. Converting. That's step 2. It takes you from here to here. Bullet. You call these Yes? In my country, bullets aren't usually followed by facts. I've seen Shrek 6 times. I love Donkey. Small, persistent, annoying like me. As far as conversion goes, you could say I traded in Mighty Mouse with the sword for the stubborn ass with the mouth. You know, I became a lawyer. That day in my office, I was washing out the coffee pot, thinking about the new cases I'd taken on for my friend Pilar. They all involved defending accused guerrillas or pressing charges against the army. The death threats, of course, were on my mind. 3 anonymous notes slipped into my mailbox just days apart. I should have prayed, right? You think I might have. These were the last words I said to myself, like Donkey. Before this is over, I'm gonna need a whole lot of serious therapy. Well, I saved money on therapy. Just months earlier, when I was in DC, I actually had therapy. I met every week with a woman who specialized in the treatment of torture and trauma survivors. Although I was working long hours, I had a fellowship at an international law center. I had to make time to figure things out. I had no job in Mexico to go back to. I was 36. Where would I work? What did I want on a personal level? A relationship? A child? How dangerous would it be for me to return? One by one, I answered the questions. I wanted a relationship. I would set up a private legal practice. I would return to Mexico in spite of the years of death threats and increasingly violent attacks. What do you think will happen when you go back? The therapist asked. I answered her honestly. I believe that they will kill me. So why did I go? Why did I go back? I just kept hoping I was wrong.
Thank you so much, Alba, for such a moving, intense portrayal of Digna Ochoa. And we would like to show you some pictures of the performance of Alba. And Digna has been performed in both in Spanish and in English. Thank you very much. And now I would like to go to the next part of our program, where we're going to have a conversation between the playwright, Pat Davis, and Alba Jaramillo, the actress of the One Moment Show. And I would like to give you some information about them, some quick bios. Alba Jaramillo is a Latina immigrant lawyer, activist, and actress from Sonora, Mexico, who grew up in the United States without legal papers until she almost was done with her undergraduate studies. She graduated magna cum laude with a double major in theater arts and anthropology from the University of Arizona, and with a law degree from Arizona State University. She is the executive director of Arizona Justice for Our Neighbors, and a legal aid and advocacy administration that provides legal services to immigrants and asylum seekers. Over the years, Ms. Jaramillo has created programs that served hundreds of immigrants in Arizona. She plays the role of Digna Ochoa in the play Digna. In the summer of 2017, Jaramillo spent several months in the state of Veracruz, where she met Digna Ochoa's family. She used this as an opportunity to deepen her understanding of her character's story. Patricia Davis is an American author, poet, and playwright. She was executive director of the Guatemala Human Rights Commission and is currently the U.S. Director for Peace Brigades International. She earned a BA in English from Carleton College and an MFA in creative writing from the American University. In 2010, Davis produced her first play entitled Alternative Methods. In 2015 to 2016, she was invited by the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. to be a fellow writer in residence. There she wrote the play Digna. In February of 2017, Digna Theater in Tucson, Arizona produced the play, which was directed by Barclay Goldsmith. Patricia Davis's plays have been staged at La Mama, the Kennedy Center, Urban Stages, and Catholic University as well. Now, I would like to bring in both Alba and Pat, and I would like to ask you some questions. And then we are going to be bringing in some students and questions from the audience as well. Thank you very much, Pat and Alba, for being here. I will start with Alba with a question, and then I will continue and ask Pat also some questions. Alba, why did you want to be involved in this production and performance of Digna?
Well, I think when Barclay Goldsmith, our director, presented the play, I was really drawn to this character. First and foremost, this is a Mexicana human rights attorney and someone that is that has done so much for human rights, that gave up her life for human rights. And I think her story, it needed to be told in the United States. We needed people to know who Digna Ochoa was, and we need theater that focuses on characters that are people of color. And we also need, later we did produce the play in Spanish, we need theater in Spanish as well. But I was very drawn to this character for many, many reasons. And one of them, of course, is my own background, and my own background in the legal field, and using my career to fight for those who are disadvantaged and who are oppressed in our communities. And so I related to the character immediately. And I want to say, you know, and Pat is here, that this play is very complex. This play is, you know, one person plays are not easy. But particularly this one is very difficult because it's a play about memories in which Digna comes back from the dead to tell to give a lecture on resistance. But in the meantime, she is confronting her past memories and why she was assassinated, how that happened, who was responsible, her own doubts and her own journey in confronting what had happened to her. So the play as a one-person play is very complex. It's very rich for an actor, but I also want to add that it's also very contemporary. It speaks to the issue of resistance, and for us, particularly in the United States, to mobilize and to do something about what is happening in Mexico. All the human rights issues that the U.S. is directly linked with. So, and it's a call to action. Many people that come and see the play have been motivated to go out and join a cause. And so for all of those reasons, I think this play has been very special to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alba. And you are completely bilingual. And you perform the play both in English, as you did tonight, but when I saw you perform the play for the first time in Mexico City, you performed it in Spanish. So I would like to ask you, what are some of the challenges of performing the same character, but in two different languages?
Yeah, it's very challenging. First of all, so as you mentioned, Iani, I was born in Mexico. I grew up undocumented here. Spanish was my first language. But also, you know, I started off in bilingual education when that used to exist. but in some, in large, I am a heritage Spanish speaker. Although my mother, for example, doesn't speak English, my entire command of the Spanish language has been through pretty much hearing it and speaking it at home. I never really had, I was never really taught proper Spanish grammar in the United States. And so when Eva Tesler, who translated the play, who is also our other director, and also from Isantla, the same town that Digna is from, when she translated this play, it was, first of all, it's beautifully translated, and Pat's language in this play even is more eloquent because the Spanish language is so romantic, of course, and so it's a lot more musical. But as an actor, particularly one that I don't have, although I'm fluently bilingual and I don't speak it properly, I still speak it with an American accent. I had to have a lot of training and getting rid of that accent and also saying very long sentences because, for example, one sentence in the English language was 7 words. In Spanish, I remember it being like 15 words. And so just the translation made the play longer, but it also, you know, how you add the inflections on words and how you control your breath became more difficult because the sentences were so much longer. And then I also want to say that we Mexicans have a very dry sense of humor, and everything is about humor in our culture. And so a lot of the jokes that are written in the play, and even some of the lines that maybe in English don't sound like jokes, in Spanish, you could play around with the language and play around with the irony and the humor. And so we discovered a lot of that. But a lot of the stage directions in terms of blocking and where I would walk and the movements had to change completely because the sentences were longer. And so it really was doing 2 completely different plays almost. But this play was brought to us, it was translated into Spanish, particularly because when we opened it in Tucson, many of our immigrant community that knew about Digna Ochoa came to see the play, and they said this play needs to be in Spanish. And they demanded that it be done in Spanish. And so that's why we translated it into Spanish. And our community was so grateful. Even the times at first when I was so nervous, I think our immigrant community was so appreciative. And in Mexico, they've been so appreciative that this play has been done, is being done in Spanish and in English.
Thank you so much for your answer. Pat, I have now some questions for you. Digna is a documentary play based on the life of Digna Ochoa, as we've been talking about, and that you wrote this during your time at the arena stage. How long did it take you to write the play?
It took a little over a year to write it.
And could you tell us a little bit about how the writing process was? What are some of the sources that you used?
Yeah. Well, the writing process, actually researching it and getting all the information together took a long time. I went to Mexico and interviewed 7 different people that 3 were Digna's work colleagues, and 1 was a good friend of hers. I interviewed her brother, and I interviewed a human rights expert in Mexico, and also a former official with the Fox government at the time when Digna was killed. And I interviewed 2 of her very good friends, actually 3 in Washington. And some of them were already mutual friends. So it was just a matter of finding out more about her decision-making process and what she was struggling with when she was in the US.
Thank you very much. The next question that I have for you, Pat, is, do you think that presenting Digna as a one-woman show displays her resilience and strength better?
Well, I think that it at least gives her more space to exist and on the stage, which I wanted because her legacy was taken from her. A lot of people in Mexico, even people involved in, especially young people involved in human rights causes, don't know who Digna was. And that's not because Digna wasn't extremely well known in her time, it's because of the smear campaign undertaken by the Mexican government. after her death. And they robbed her of her legacy. And I wanted her to have the stage to herself in order to be able to have all that time to speak herself. But of course, it's more challenging to write a one-person show, I think, because you have to, as Alba was saying, have the internal struggle of the character, even while she's outwardly doing one thing, like giving a lecture on resistance. Inwardly, she's struggling with the question of why she went back to Mexico, and was that in fact resistance, or was it a form of surrender? And throughout the play, she grapples with that, and then comes to the realization by the end that sometimes resistance involves walking straight into danger.
That's right. Thank you very much for your answer. Alba, I also wanted to ask you, so I guess I would I'm trying to see if we can weave in your work as a lawyer and activist in the play. And so you were saying that one of the first things that you were able to do as you performed the play was to have the translation of the play into Spanish. But what are some of the other ways that you've been able to use your degree as a lawyer and activist? How are you able to use this play? And do you think that has met your goals then?
Yes, there's so many ways I can answer that. One of the things I'll mention is that right now, with Arizona Justice for Our Neighbors, the organization that I run, we have an asylum program to help asylum seekers in Nogales, Sonora, who are right now stuck behind the fence, waiting for their turn to claim asylum. I'm able to help them we have a program where we help them develop their declarations for their asylum applications, in which they tell their story of why they want to leave Mexico. The majority of the asylum seekers we are working with are from Guerrero. And of course, this is the place that Digna was, where she was defending the environmentalists, and where she visited shortly before she was murdered. And so what I hear on a daily level is exactly what is in this play, that the dangerous conditions of Guerrero, the corruption, how it's completely overrun by cartels, but how you also can't get help from the government, and all of them are fleeing for their lives. And so every time I speak with these asylum seekers, it takes me back to the play, and as the play states, it is Mexico's most violent state, and it continues to be so. And so it's interesting that my own professional career has also involved a lot of that, working directly with asylum seekers, many from Guerrero. And so that's one of the things that is still very present in my life. But I'm also an organizer, and I'm also a community activist. And so my work has been around many controversial things. Recently, I've been doing a lot of community mobilization around police brutality and police murders that have occurred in our own communities here in Tucson, Arizona. And so I go out and I organize protests, I speak before the press, and even, I've had anonymous messages from people telling me that I need to be careful what I'm saying, because the police have sent detectives to watch what I'm saying. And so then, but at the same time, I know that, and I have experienced harassment when I've engaged in some of my activism work, but I also, I still feel that it's a responsibility for me particularly, and I don't know why, but it has always been the case in my life, and so I still go do it, so I understand that purpose, and I understand that that impatience that happens inside, that you can't just watch it and not say anything. So in that sense, to the character, I can relate to her a lot, and probably saying and doing things that some people probably would not feel comfortable doing.
Thank you very much. Pat, how did your human rights work influence the play?
Well, it's funny because the play actually influenced my human rights work. So they've influenced each other, but I was taking a break from human rights work just to do creative writing, and the play led me back into human rights work. When I was doing the interviews in Mexico, I talked to Digna's good friend who said that she had been thinking of contacting Peace Brigades International, which is an organization that sends international volunteers to accompany defenders who are under threat, who have requested accompaniment. And Digna put it off, but it got me thinking about what else I could do that was actually not just writing. And so I now work for Peace Brigades International, representing their projects in Honduras, Mexico, and Guatemala. And I think it's important work, because I think anything we can do in this country and around the world, which Peace Brigades has offices all over Europe and in Australia, anything we can do to support people who are under serious threat in countries to our south, and we also in Indonesia, is really important. So the play led me back into human rights work, but my previous human rights work, I'm sure, influenced my my decision to write the play, partly because we had mutual friends, and I met Digna a couple of times in Washington when she was here in exile. And when she was killed, I was in the middle of writing a book with a nun who had been a colleague of mine. She was a US citizen nun who was tortured in Guatemala. And she had actually gotten to know Digna quite well, and she was just devastated when she heard that Digna had been killed. And so, partly in response to my friend's devastation, I organized a vigil outside the Mexican embassy. And it was an extremely beautiful, healing moment for a lot of people. We left flowers in front of the door of the embassy, tons and tons of bouquets of flowers. And I went to my car to get it, and I was driving back, and they had been immediately removed because it was such an embarrassment. This was such a huge case, and it was such an embarrassment to the new government of Vicente Fox, who was supposed to be, you know, a good government. And so I think also just the fact that I had known a lot of people similar to Digna in terms of their commitment and facing danger. And so she wasn't as much of a mystery to me as she might have been. And during the time that I was taking a break from this work to do creative writing, I was also following very closely the protest in Ferguson and the killing of Black Lives Matter activists. And in my mind, I was making all kinds of connections with things that are happening in countries in Latin America, and thinking, this is starting to happen here. And this was under Obama. So a lot of people weren't really awake to the seriousness of what was going on, but there were a number of ways that our civil liberties were being eroded. And so I thought it would be really important to have someone from a country who has experienced a more developed erosion of civil liberties speak to us about this could happen, this is how you resist.
Thank you very much. And I do agree that Digna is this study of resistance, and is this example of what could happen and is happening, has been happening in a country like Mexico, or I can think of in a country like Guatemala as well, as you have clearly pointed out. Now I would like to bring in some students that have prepared also some questions for Alba and for Pat. And I would like to bring them in to our discussion and have their voices also be heard. And these students are in my course, which is Spanish 302, Hispanic Culture, Indigenous and Colonial Latin America. And we've been studying topics that have to do with, I guess, colonial times, indigenous times in Latin America, but we're working with these connections of contemporary Mexico and Peru. So I would like to introduce the first student, Maria Magali Gonzalez. She's a senior majoring in psychology and minoring in Spanish. She's also a modern language assistant for the Spanish program. Maria Magali.
Hi, thank you. My question is for Alba Jaramillo. I wanted to know if there's any piece of yourself that you let bleed through when you play Digna. Do you allow parts of your personality to shine through her character?
That's a good question. the the play, the whole process of rehearsing for this play was for us a very lengthy process. First we started with just working with the text and working with that script and analyzing us. I mean, we did this for almost a year actually, and it was so just such an amazing experience to be able to sit with a play for that long. But as well, my directors, Barclay Goldsmith and Eva, I'm so grateful for all of the direction that they've given me. But a lot of that direction has been get to know yourself. Don't just act. Look at the script and also get to know your own mannerisms. How do you laugh? What do you do when you're embarrassed? Where do you carry pain in your body? And so the process of then using the script and then taking it to the stage also had to be a process where I had to be very vulnerable and very honest with myself. And I'll give you one example. At one point, we did a lot of physical work on determining where I carried tension in my body and actually recalling memories of my own experiences and having experienced violence. And, you know, like many women, I am also a survivor of gender-based violence. And so I had to go back to those moments and remember that and feel it in my body. And it was very hard. I had to be in that moment and you know, and I guess that's what they do a lot in trauma therapy is just that. But for this purpose, it was actually so that I could take those experiences of trauma and take them onto the stage. In the play, there's a few very powerful scenes in which she's actually, Digna is remembering even her own sexual assault, even when she was almost abducted and kidnapped. And so those moments of the play is where I had to go back into my own trauma, and then knowing, you know, a lot of it was in the hands and carrying tension in the hands and being able to take it on the stage. And at the same time, it was such a wonderful process. It sounds really terrible and scary, but it's very healing because you are taking control of those memories, you're taking control of the situation, and you're using it for something powerful and something good. And so a lot of that, you know, it actually gave more reality to the play. And then even knowing, how do I laugh? How do I speak? Why is this play important to me? How do I relate to Digna sharing this message of resistance and how I relate that into my own life, like I answered earlier in Dr. Iani's question. So I think as an actor, every actor has a different process. But I think that was the process that I used. I don't think I could have ever done this play without working on my own self and at the same time getting to know Digna's character while simultaneously getting to know who I am as a person and what are all my traumas, what are my mannerisms, what is my purpose.
Thank you so much, Alba. And I'm wondering if we could show some pictures of the real Digna Ochoa to the audience. So you can see here. And so you know that she was going to be a nun. And so thank you very much. And I would like to introduce the second student, Dina Singh. She's a junior majoring in pre-law and minoring in Spanish. Dina.
Thank you, Profe. So my question is for Pat Davis. Why did you choose to have Digna Ochoa as the only character in the play? And what message does Digna Ochoa give to women all around the world?
Well, having her be the only character, I answered a little while ago, but also I was working with a dramaturg in the Arena Stage program, and he suggested, let's make this a one-person show. She has, you know, she's very interesting. She has a journey that she makes internally. And so that's why it was a one-person show. It's also much easier to move those shows around. You know, Alba's been able to take it to Mexico. It's less complicated. than a show with, say 5 characters. But what I think Digna is telling us as women, and this is what I got from her life, really studying her life and how she lived it, is to not to allow yourself to be characterized by other people. Digna was from a small town herself. She had a country accent. She was indigenous, and she had the most brilliant legal mind and strategies in Mexican history. And she didn't allow herself to be put down or to be put into her place. And there was a lot of conflict around her because she was so resistant, in fact, to people telling her where she belonged. I think that's one of the messages. And another message is to look within ourselves at what the things are that we have to resist, not only outside in society, but what messages have we internalized that we need to stand up to? And how do we flip the narrative? And how do we say, no, this is actually the story, and then make that our story? And I think also what I heard from people who I talked to is that Digna had a huge capacity for joy. So even when she was looking at becoming a nun, she was doing so very joyfully. She loved it. And when she was sent away because they thought she wasn't quite going to be ready to be a nun yet, so she left joyfully. And she lived her life, it's easy to think that someone might be one or the other, like joyful and self-centered, or they would be service-oriented. But she was both. And I think that she tells us to be that, because as women, historically, we've been told to sacrifice for others. Our needs aren't important. Our wants aren't important. But I think Digna found a way to have such joy in the act of serving, but also really living to the very fullest. And I think she sets a marvelous example. I think she would also tell us that we need to be especially aware of women human rights defenders, because they are more vulnerable than men in a number of ways. For one, they can be killed much more easily because they're already being delegitimized just by virtue of the fact that they're women. For example, the government was able to pretty easily say, oh, Digna killed herself, even though the evidence was completely contrary to that assumption or finding. If Digna had been a man and they found her body and there was no powder on the hands and there were signs of struggle and cuts to the face and all of these things, I don't think they would have had as easy a time saying, oh, she wanted to get back at her former colleagues, so she staged her own murder. I think that men already have a level of legitimacy in society that women don't. So killings of women that are happening all over Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, other parts of the world, the government has a much easier time of blaming those on affairs or relationships gone wrong. And so women are in much greater danger, and we need to be aware and look at ways we can support women human rights defenders.
Thank you very much, Pat. And now I would like to ask Jacqueline Biller to ask her question. She's a senior majoring in global cultural studies. Jacqueline.
Thank you, Professor. My question is for Alba. As an activist, lawyer, and community leader, what have you learned from combining your work with the arts? How do the arts play a role in social justice and activism overall?
That's a great question, and also something that is really dear to my heart in terms of my own purpose. So I started my own education and my own career was actually started in the theater. That's all I wanted to do, was be a stage actress when I was young, and then later, especially learning about anthropology, social justice issues, I gravitated towards the legal field. But this part of me of theater has never left me, and for me it is so important and so fulfilling. And so I think, and I think this play, Digna by Pat Davis, is a perfect example of the power that that combining the arts and social activism, you know, the power that it has. I think through the theater, we definitely can open minds, and we can open the hearts. And then when we open the hearts, people are more likely to listen to the messages. It has a whole different impact than just doing a protest or doing a petition, but through the art form, you actually take an audience member through a character's journey. And then they start to just letting, you know, they become much more open-minded, their hearts are open. And so then the message, it actually it impacts people a whole different way. And so that is what we are doing with this play and then other plays that with Teatro Dignidad is specifically promoting human rights through theater, and it works. I mean, I think, you know, I don't even know how many performances it has been now of Digna. I don't know if it's 28 or it's around there, but there hasn't been one single performance where people don't come up to me afterwards and say, I want to do something. I want to, or the people that never thought about activism after seeing this play want to get involved in social activism. And I think, you know, often the arts are not valued, the arts are not funded, the arts are not taken seriously, and this play is an example of the power that it has. And I think we need to fund the arts completely. We need to keep theater alive. Theater is disappearing in many communities, and we need to fight for that because it has a role. It has a role in not just producing art, but it has a role in recording the histories that are happening in our communities and keeping that alive forever. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to ask Rudy Pandales to ask her question. She is a senior double majoring in global business and management, and she's minoring in finance. Rudy.
Hello, thank you. So my question is, I'm part of an organization that is composed of a student volunteer group. It's international. It is called ASSESS, and it stands for Saving the Earth from A to Z. My question to you is, we work together to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So one of them is actually about human rights. So my question to you is, with your experience, what will be your recommendation for students like me so that we can continue on towards the goal to achieve human rights and equality for all? Thank you.
Well, maybe Alba and I can both answer to an extent. I would say what you're doing is really important, and I'm glad you're doing it. I think it's really important to continue taking a stand and not to do the easy thing, to challenge at every opportunity the small injustices as well as the big ones. And to remember also that much of the world where there are communities that, for example, I'm thinking of Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala, for example, where there is a lot of underdevelopment, so-called underdevelopment, and where the big corporations want to come in and develop with their large-scale industries. A lot of times this is not what people want. And so to have in your mind that the will of the people and what they actually want, and I know that these goals talk about participatory development, sustainable development, and industry, but that the will of the people who are affected is paramount. And a lot of times what's called development, at least right now by the US, for example, our plan to solve everything in Central America and the refugee crisis is large-scale industries. And that's actually displacing people. And that's the reason, in part, that Digna was killed, because she had defended the indigenous people who were trying to protect their forest. So I think just having the perspective that the people on the ground who are affected are the ones that matter, and keep speaking truth to power.
What I would add to that is, I think that the work you're doing with your colleagues at the university is so important. I don't think we use the term human rights enough in this country. we are so ethnocentric and focused on our own legal system that we forget that there is an entire body of law and standards that including the US needs to be held accountable to. And so these UN Sustainable Development Goals are things that the majority of the communities, outside of universities don't talk about enough. And so I think that, organizing, discussing it, talking about it in your universities, but taking it to the communities and to your own work as a professional is so important, because we need to understand that what we do in the United States with our own communities and how we affect countries outside of the United States all have to be looked at within a framework of human rights. And that even in our own legal system is not valued enough as our constitutions, our Supreme Court, and it should be, because we should be held to the same standard that the rest of the world is in fighting for the dignity of every single human being. And we should also be a part of all of those international treaties that the rest of the world, it's shameful that to this point, we still haven't even signed CEDAW, the Convention on Elimination on Violence and Discrimination Against Women, that we pulled out of the Paris Accord. All of these, important international treaties, we need to be a part of that, and we need to hold ourselves accountable. But we need to start also using the term human rights and looking at our own communities and how our own government is protecting the right to people to live in peace, the right, to not live in poverty, the right to not experience any form of violence from the state, all the issues of police brutality, the right to Indigenous sovereignty, all of these, the right of children, all of these are issues that the rest of the world is fully discussing. And I think we need to continue that dialogue. So I really commend you on the work that you're doing with your students.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank the students for their questions. And now I'm going to be bringing in some of the questions that the audience has sent. And we encourage you to please put in any questions that you have for Alba and Pat in the chat box. And I would like to read to you one of the questions that has already come. And the question is from Marilyn, and she asks, why does Digna come back from the dead? And then she wonders, this preposition, and she puts that in quotes, would seem to dilute the impact of her strength and vision.
So I can take a stab at that, and I'm sure Alba, you have ideas as well, but Digna comes back from the dead because of the 43 students killed in Ayotzinapa. She sees the steep decline in human rights that has happened in Mexico in the 15 years between her death and the disappearance of the 43 students, which was the most shocking human rights catastrophe that Mexico has faced since probably 1968. And so Digna comes back to talk to a US audience, specifically in the English version of the play, to tell us about the way that our government is closing the borders and at the same time sending guns down, sending funding for the military down through the Merida Initiative, cooperating on all levels with the Mexican government, no matter whether funding, continuing the funding, no matter what the human rights situation is. And to say, look, you need to do something. Are you just going to sit and let this country decay with the help of your government? So that's the reason that Digna comes back from the dead. It could have been a play made while she's still alive, but I think her resurrection, and actually when she expressed fear to one of her fellow nuns when she was getting threats, she said, I've gotten a death threat again. And the nun said, no, Digna, you are not threatened with death. You're threatened with resurrection. So actually she has been resurrected, and in many ways, in the work of the people in Mexico, she has been resurrected. The people who are continuing her work. So I see her presence on stage after her killing as a defiance and an act of resistance.
Thank you, Pat. And I would like to see if we can see a picture of the event that Pat was talking about and that is mentioned in the play Digna, because she talks about what happened to the 43 students that were disappeared. And Pat, and that was in 2014?
It was in 2015.
And if you could tell us a little bit more about what happened in this gruesome event, because you mentioned it in the play, but for some of the audience that has not read this part of the play, obviously.
Well, these students were going to the commemoration of the 1968 massacre, which had occurred when students were gathered, largely students, but also teachers and also the general public was gathered to protest police brutality. So every year, students would go and commemorate this event. And they would normally commandeer buses. It was just part of the student tradition. They get on a bus, they'd say, hey, we're taking the bus, and off they would go, and there'd never been a problem. On this particular night, the students were confronted with armed security forces who loaded them into trucks and took them away. And there was a firefight in which 3 students were killed on the spot, but the others were taken away and disappeared. And it turns out that after a long cover-up, the Mexican government, in which the Mexican government said that they were mistaken for drug dealers and were killed by a neighboring cartel, it turns out that these buses were actually loaded with heroin and were being used by the security forces themselves, the police, particularly to move heroin to Chicago. So the students had accidentally taken a bus that was loaded with heroin. At the same time, however, a couple of years prior, there had been a killing of 2 students by police, 2 students from this particular school in Ayotzinapa, which is known for resistance, which is known for living out the ideals of the Mexican Revolution. And they have clashed with, I mean, they're poor students, they're mostly indigenous students. They are among the brightest in their area and their generation, because it's very difficult to get into the school. And so there was already tension with the police. 2 had already been killed the previous year and had never been investigated. And on this occasion, I guess the military was also involved, and then there were various federal level officials and state level officials involved in the cover-up. And I suppose that the security forces and those officials thought that they could get away with this. And it's rather shocking that they thought they could, and they haven't been able to. And this government, because of the international pressure that's been brought to bear, this government currently in Mexico is making the case a big priority, and they are getting some movement on it.
Thank you so much, Pat, for the explanation. And I would like to add another question in here. And this is from Brian, and I think it goes really well with what you were explaining to us, Pat, about the human rights abuses of the students. And Brian asked, what kind of pressure should the international community, especially the US, apply to the Mexican government?
Well, the pressure, I think that is the clearest to and the easiest to apply is simply to raise concern and reproach the Mexican government every time a human rights defender is killed, because human rights defenders are only asking that the laws that are already in place be followed. They are demanding adherence to the rule of law. That's all they're doing, and they're being killed because of it. And so to date, there have been over 10 killings in Mexico this year. There were 19 or 20 last year. And you don't hear much about it. So to raise awareness about it, to tweet about it, to watch it, to join Amnesty International, to join campaigns, to write the Mexican government. Those are the easiest things. Changing US policy toward Mexico is more difficult. First, of course, we need to ease the cruel immigration laws that are keeping people from even applying for asylum. And we need to look again at where we're funding the army and where we're funding the police. And is that having a good effect? Clearly it isn't. And so we may be having, more opportunity to actually push for change in a new Senate, which hopefully we'll have soon. And there may be ways to move forward in a more productive way in terms of bilateral relations.
Thank you, Pat. And the next question from another person from the audience is, and this one is actually for Alba. The question is, how different is it to perform the play over Zoom?
It's very different. And I want to say that that even though this is a one-person play, that I don't do this alone. I do this with a team of artists and especially my directors. We rehearsed for this 15-minute dramatized reading, so it wasn't a cold reading, and so what you saw was actually not only my work, it was the work of my directors. But rehearsing over Zoom and performing over Zoom is so different. A lot of times, the movement, you can express a lot of emotion or intention through what you do with your body. And doing something over Zoom, of course, you're only seeing me up, the top of my body. And so you're not, I don't have the freedom to move around a lot. I also don't have the board, so we end up doing the signs instead of, having our whiteboard or a flip chart that we use sometimes too. And so that was really different. Also, being able, like where you place images, all of those are acting techniques in which you as an actor have to visualize what you're talking about. If you don't see it, the audience is not going to see it. So you have to play around and seeing where's my dad in this memory, in this part of the room, where's my mom, and then speaking to the camera, speaking to this little green dot instead of having an entire audience. This play is really wonderful to place on stage because it is a dialogue that Digna is having with the audience, and so you get a lot of as an actor, it's really enriching to see people's reactions when you ask a question and you see people nod their heads, or they're wanting to talk back with you in a lot of the questions that she asks the audience. So that piece, you end up missing that energy in terms of being in dialogue with the audience. But on the other hand, it's also really nice, I think, doing this performance, it makes you as an actor, sometimes you get lost in the voice and the movement and the costume and the props, and you don't pay attention to what is most important, and that is the language. The script itself. And so when you're in front of the camera, the laptop of the green dot, yeah, at that point as an actor, you have all this opportunity to actually look at the words. And this play itself, because it is a one-person play, it is really nice actually for Zoom, where you can, take your time to actually hear all of the language and visualize the images yourself. But again, I think I'm only able to do that because I have a good script that Pat created for us, but I also have a great team of directors that have been a part of this through the entire 3 years that we've been performing it.
I really think it was very effective the way that you used the signs instead of the board, and I think it worked really well. I have another question from the audience. They ask, do you think that Digna, being an Indigenous, played in her treatment before and after her death? I guess the fact that she was indigenous, does that have an impact in the way that her death was treated, and also even before, the way that she was treated while she was alive?
How much of the treatment she got was because of being a woman, and how much was because of being indigenous?
I guess the question from the audience is, does the fact that she was indigenous, does that mean that the treatment that she received in a way was worse while she was alive and even during her death? That's the question that they had.
Yeah, I just can't say, because we don't know how she might have been treated if she hadn't been indigenous. And, you know, I believe a lot of people in Mexico have some indigenous blood, and they, you know, it just is hard to know really how much of how she was treated was because she was a brash woman who refused to be told to shut up, and how much it was because she was indigenous. I think the fact that she was from a small town and had a country accent and did not come from the upper classes and the well-educated upper classes that some of her colleague lawyers came from, did provoke in some of them a level of intolerance for her, and left her actually alone by herself, which is why she had to start her own law office. And because she was alone, she was easily killed. I just can't, I don't know enough to tell you how much the indigenous element played in. I do think it made her a very effective lawyer, because she was going into indigenous communities and into the poorest areas of Mexico with complete humility and with a familiarity that a lawyer who had been brought up in Mexico City in the upper classes would not have had.
Thank you very much.
I agree with Patty. It is hard to tell, and I do wonder how her own indigenous background influenced her on the type of cases that she took. I know that she took one of the very high profile cases that she took was the rape of indigenous women by military men, which was one of the first cases against the Mexican government for human rights abuses. And so that I wonder about that all the time. How did it influence? Because she would defend the people that were least likely to have access to an attorney and least likely to have justice, and all of her cases were like that. So I wonder how much of her own background as someone who is poor from a small town, and that is in an area where the Totonaca people are still very present, influence her work and her choice in cases.
Thank you very much. Pat, I have a question for you, as we're now very close to the end of the program. This is a screenplay, but I guess my question for you is, do you have any plans to publish this?
Yes, I do have plans. I haven't acted on them. I just actually hadn't even thought about it, but it is available online on the New Play Exchange, which is an amazing resource of contemporary plays that anyone can have access to. Anyone who wants to read plays or produce plays. So it is up on the New Play Exchange.
I think it would be wonderful to publish it. And also I was thinking, I guess as a Spanish professor, that it would be wonderful to have this in a bilingual edition too.
Yeah, so that's a good idea.
And I think that I'm going to now ask Pat to, if you could read for us, Pat, your playwright's note that you include in Digna, normally when this is performed. If you could read this for us.
Okay. Digna Ochoa was one of Mexico's most prominent human rights defenders. Her life came to an end in Mexico City in 2001, but her story reaches well beyond that place and time. Her story, in fact, keeps repeating. Globally, as resources become scarcer and companies begin to exploit areas that once were isolated, struggles of the kind Digna defended have skyrocketed. Those working to protect the environment and those defending the protectors are increasingly targeted for attack. In Mexico, 18 environmental defenders were murdered in 2019. Globally, the number of murders in 2019 was 212, an average of more than 4 murders a week. In Mexico, as in Digna's time, international awards and connections provide no protection. In January 2017, Isidro Valdineco Lopez, a subsistence farmer known for his work to stop illegal logging, was shot to death. Valdineco, who received the Goldman Prize in 2015, had recently returned to his community in the northern Sierra Madres after spending time in exile, having fled because of threats. Through mutual friends, I met Digna when she was living in exile in Washington. Although our meeting was brief, she impressed me. She was petite. She bowed her head shyly after we were introduced, and yet she radiated strength. A play can't do justice to the bravery and grit of Mexico's human rights defenders. Digna is simply an attempt to open a space for story to do its work.
Thank you, Pat. And I would like to show you a slide of Digna's grave. And Alba, this is your picture, right?
Yes, that is the picture. One of the trips I took to Veracruz in Misantla. This is her town, and that is her grave. And in October 19, 4 days from now, it'll be 19 years since Digna Ochoa was assassinated. And in a sense, you know, someone else earlier asked, why did she come back to life? She hasn't been fully put to rest yet. This case has not closed. Just recently, the Inter-American Court opened up the case because they found that the Mexican government was negligent in how they ruled and investigated that case. So as we speak, this case is being litigated, her murder is being litigated in the Inter-American Court. And so I hope that there will be justice soon for her, and she could be allowed to rest. I don't think she will rest until, and I don't think we should rest until there is justice achieved for her. But I think for me, visiting that particular place was very special to me, and being close to her after working on this script and studying so much about her was an experience that was very dear to my heart.
Thank you very much, Alba. And now Pat will read a final quote.
Yes, this quote is from an interview that Digna did with Kerry Kennedy. And Digna was talking about how injustice had led her to confront the army and the police. She said, "Some people thought that I was courageous, but I've always felt anger at the suffering of others. Anger is energy, it's a force. It's an act of if an act of injustice doesn't provoke anger in me, it could be seen as indifference, passivity. It's injustice that motivates us to do something, to take risks, knowing that if we don't, things will remain the same."
Thank you so much, Pat. And with this, we would like to conclude this evening's event. And I would like to thank our two guest speakers, Alba Jaramillo and Pat Davis, for being here with us, for sharing of your talent, the story of Digna Ochoa, and may we be able to continue working and not forget that we need to fight for this justice. And I would like to thank also Fort Hall Forum and GBH for sponsoring this event. And please remember the next coming up event. Thank you very much and have a good evening.